So welcome everybody. My name is Janet Chapman, founder of Crowd2Map. Welcome to our regular monthly Youthmapper session for March. Great to see so many people here. This is a special session because it's going to be hosted by Stella from American Geographical Society with some guests from USAID and other agricultural places. So we're going to be specifically talking about the agricultural mapping project. So thank you, and over to you, Stella.
Hey, hello everyone. I am Stella Maris Nakachovamno, for those that I've met for the first time. I'm really excited to engage with you all. So today is our phase 2 of engagement of the pilot crowd-sourced crop identification project. It's part of the remote training or engagement series with the Youthmappers in Tanzania. And we were lucky that this day matched with Crowd2Map monthly engagements for Youthmappers. So we decided to combine so that we can have the team at once all together. I'm happy to have you all from the Europe, UK, Americas, and Tanzania, and the different parts of Africa, countries of Africa. You're welcome. So today we have a specific session, which is more of like professional development, engagement, having a few members of our team share experience and great lessons about or giving us a background and a foundation as to why we're really engaging in this project. Last week, we had a remote training session from Dr. Makaska and Chad and myself giving a little introduction. And today we're going in depth to understand the agriculture and economic situation of Tanzania. We have a great team. And today's moderator today is Somia. Somia is an international project specialist, special advisor from the USDA Foreign Agriculture Service. And we're happy to have you, Somia. Somia is part of the project that is taking place or through which we are engaging all these sessions. And today's engagement is also going to be just about 2 hours, where we'll have Somia take over and make introductions. We have Paul, who is going to give us an amazing engagement on the history of Tanzanian agriculture. We will have Mr. Geoffrey Kirenga, who will give us the economics and Tanzanian agriculture. And then we will have a Youthmappers panel. These are alumni and former leaders within the Youthmappers network that will talk about the different specific niches that Youthmappers might want to highlight, even those that are not Youthmappers but wish to learn about how Youthmappers have been engaging in most of their projects and the key lessons, all tools that they can pick and integrate into their day-to-day work. So I would love to hand over to Somia to take over. Somia, you're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Stella. I think you basically covered it in terms of introductions, but I'd just like to say thank you to all of our speakers and to all the Youthmappers who are present today. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing presentation. With that, I'd love to hand over to Paul O'Keefe to give us a short presentation on the history of Tanzanian agriculture. And I think you should be able to share your screen.
It looks like I can, yes, and I will. I'll just quickly say good morning. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure. My name's Paul O'Keefe. I'm currently an assistant teaching professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey. I was also a student of Brent McCuskers, which is the link. My research has been based in Tanzania, and I'm going to give a short overview. I'm going to just pull up a fairly rudimentary PowerPoint, and there's going to be a focus on the Kilimanjaro region, which is not generalizable to the entire of Tanzania, but I think speaks to many of the issues that we see, and that's because that's where I've done the bulk of my field work. So does that screen sharing work? Is that okay? I'm just, yeah, I'm not going to full screen it. So anyway, this terrible old map I just pulled out. I'm sorry, I'm working on what I can get from my computer, especially in a room full of youth mappers. But the basis of this was both master's and then PhD work on the eastern and southeastern slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro, the kind of home of the Chaga originally. But the core of what I've learned about Tanzanian agriculture has been studying it in two villages, Uba and Ungayoni, and how that related to other processes of social change and of environmental change. So again, in terms of a quick overview, I'm going to try and just highlight the major kind of thematic changes. Tanzania, which wasn't, say, a settler economy in the way that parts of Kenya were settled quite heavily, or certainly South Africa. It was a place where agriculture has dominated livelihoods through the colonial and out of the colonial era, and this was often many different types of crops in the Kilimanjaro region. We saw rapid adoption of coffee growing as an income-generating agricultural means of production in the 1920s and 30s began to accelerate, and by the 1950s had become a really quite significant part of not just the local Kilimanjaro economy, but the entire Tanganyikan colonial economy as it was. And at the center of the strength of this coffee economy was the power of the coffee growers who were organized together collectively. And this, by the 1950s, had provided, for some of the Chaga who lived on Kilimanjaro, a very high relative standard of living and income compared to other parts of Africa at the time. Coffee in particular in the Kilimanjaro region has been one of the main important cash crops. But the difficulties in growing coffee have kind of been emblematic as we moved through the Ujamaa era under the Nyerere first independence regime. There was an increasingly strong attempts to nationalize, to socialize levels of agricultural production, to control its distribution, and this in various ways led to the growth of inefficiencies in production, a drop-off in many places of export earnings of agriculture, an informalization of trading links across the border with Kenya, sorry, I'm following the chat. If I see things pop up, I can't help but look back and make sure I've not done something. But this era, which began to change post-Nyerere into the kind of agricultural liberalization of the 1980s, is where I'm really going to begin to dive in. The photos that I'm sharing here are all just ones I took on my field work, various parts up and down the slopes of Kilimanjaro, but just something I'd like to emphasize, even on the picture on this screen, especially for those of you who are thinking about mapping crops and the ways you might go about this. I think there's maize you can spot at the bottom of this picture. There may be a couple of coffee bushes hiding in between the bananas. The agricultural system historically on Kilimanjaro, which enabled the development of livelihoods there, was based around plantains, bananas, and generating cheap carbohydrates, but also coffee, which could generate income. And these are often intercropped and mixed together, and often also within broader agroforestry systems. So how you can separate all that out on a mapping tool it's beyond my pay grade. But agriculture, especially in this region, developed quite intensively on small 18-year-old girls. Oh, we okay there? It developed in part because right. Okay.
Stella, you need to kick that user out. They're Zoom bombing you.
Yeah, I've kicked them out.
Great, thank you.
you.
So, so in this part of Tanzania, where because of the nature, the topography of Kilimanjaro, rising above the plains, land has always been a restricted issue. And in this context, what we have seen is the development of, in some ways, almost vertical forms of agriculture where trees and bananas and coffee plants, maize and other things have in the past been planted in the same plots. But as in other parts of Tanzania where there's been fewer people, lower population density, or greater space to expand, there have been obviously the rise of mechanized, more intensive, monocropping or larger single crops. Tanzania, and just to emphasize, I'm sure most of you are very aware, agriculture is at the absolute heart still of its economic production. Historically, it was. Historically, the vast majority of people have been involved in agricultural livelihoods, and that's changed, but it still remained absolutely vital. And as we moved out of the Ujamaa era and move into the 1980s, 1990s, we see attempts to liberalize agricultural markets, to open up trade, both increasingly within East Africa, but also export-orientated agriculture, is a formal strategy of trying to fundamentally grow Tanzania's economy with the logic that economic development will trickle down to social development. What we saw in Kilimanjaro in this context, and I'm just trying to highlight how agriculture is always been, related to other changes ongoing in society. The union was the Coffee Growers Union was weakened under the Nyerere regime. If anything, it was a bit of a powerful threat, but it was also not supported hugely in the liberalization era. And what this meant in terms of coffee growers on Mount Kilimanjaro was often the quality control of the coffee production, or support was much less from the government. Quality control couldn't be maintained. People would be offering money to take lower quality coffee, and people would very broadly, the amount of coffee being produced and income generated was reducing. People were choosing increasingly not to grow coffee in a region where it had historically been the main cash crop. And this was particularly pronounced in the early 2000s, when the coffee price completely collapsed for a short while. And one of the most striking findings of my studies of farming in Kilimanjaro was how many people pulled out their coffee trees in order to plant maize on their small farms, because you could get a guaranteed income selling locally, you could eat the crop. But that's also a long-term change to the landscape, to the income generating possibilities of families going forwards in different ways. Were you able to cope in the bad times to benefit in the good times? So some farmers had continued to grow coffee, but some farmers had moved towards more subsistence forms of existence. And increasingly, in talking to farmers, actually, sources of income, and I'll come back to this at the end, despite themselves saying that they're still agricultural livelihoods and they're farmers, a lot of where they say their money comes from is not from farming sources anymore. So just going into the kind of the 90s to 2000s to really emphasize a couple of things that are very important to emphasize. The relationship between Tanzanian economic development policy, global development policies, the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, was through the 2000s, the development of the Kilimo Kwanza program, Agriculture First, which obviously I'm sure most of you are very aware of, which was very closely related to the World Bank's Agriculture for Development of the late 2000s, which centers the idea that agriculture should drive economic growth in countries like Tanzania, which still retained a majority rural and agricultural population. And this has led in parts of Tanzania to a large increase in investment. Some crops we've seen things like cashews, sweet potatoes, many different crops, cassava, numbers have grown, exports have increased in recent years. And this has underpinned a broad 4 to 6% growth in most years in the Tanzanian economy. But this is happening at a time where still the broad structural logic is slightly fewer people being involved in agriculture than there was about 80% of the population about 40 years ago were thought to be involved in agriculture. Now it's closer to 60%. So framing these questions and why they matter and how they relate, in my thinking, to other core issues of rural Tanzania, I just want to highlight this question of what does it mean to continue to center agriculture. The government of Tanzania very much does. People, even if often the evidence from household surveys suggested that actually most of their income didn't come from agriculture, still saw themselves 100% as farmers. So what does that mean to shape a rural development strategy going forward? What does that mean in a world where most other countries have seen structurally a rural population reduction? We then, my research was intimately about environmental risk and how that affect agriculture and how it related to an economic risk. And I think, this is an absolutely classic case of, even what has worked for some people now agriculturally allowed some agricultural growth. Does this become, is this still viable in an era of enhanced climate change, in an era, where people are expected to live with increased risk? And I just want to re-emphasize, and I just wanted to show a little bit of data from my field work to show what I mean by the importance of things in the agricultural economy that maybe aren't purely about farming. Just to contextualize, again, in this place, it really needs to be emphasized that the risk that most farming households live with on a day-to-day basis is going to shape, willingness to invest in things, ability to cope. In the study area, I was looking, almost 3/4 of the households were massively affected by drought. The reasons why a quarter said they didn't typically get affected by drought were very interesting, but not where I'm going here. And this drought, again, was the most strongly correlated thing within farmer responses with how people ended up going hungry in the areas. So agricultural production in these areas still remains critical to people's food security, as well as broader economic development. But this sense that even though where I was, again, about 3/4 of the households were adamant that they were farmers, almost the same amount said there wasn't enough land to farm as much as they'd like, which is something that will continue to play as an issue in a world where population is still edging up in these countries. But just wanted to show quick income, obviously with all the disclaimers about how reliable income data can be. But when I asked across my surveys where people were getting their farming households, where their income was actually coming from, they were reporting between remittances and gifts from others and other forms of off-farm income was well over 40% of the income that was recorded in these agricultural households that I surveyed. So my kind of brief conclusion is agriculture remains absolutely central to a Tanzanian economic development strategy, to the perception of what most people in Tanzania see themselves still as doing and want to be doing, but it's occurring in a world of changing risk, enhanced risk, especially environmental risk, but it's still there as the bedrock, about a quarter of Tanzanian GDP is tied directly to agriculture, and still over half of the population working in it. So anything, any solutions need to really start from this position. Agricultural development's absolutely central to both Tanzania's idea of growth and continued real progress that has been made in the last decade. And it still remains the dominant form of livelihood, even though that kind of framing hides an increasing diversity of what actually it means to be an agricultural household producer in modern Tanzania. So that's what I've got there. I'm a little shorter than I planned, but probably better than going over. Stop sharing.
Paul, thank you. That was great. I really enjoyed the salient questions that you raised about the nature of livelihoods in Tanzania, and I appreciated the historical through line that you brought in regarding liberalization and coffee to maize and so on. So thank you very much for that.
I hope it was something to, I wasn't quite sure of what I was trying to pitch at, but that's my sense. I just wanted to give a sense of agriculture as being fundamental, but also agriculture hiding a lot of other things that are going on. So yeah, thank you for listening. Obviously, if anyone has questions, others may know way more about other examples than me.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions. So if anyone has anything, please feel free to raise your hand and ask away. I know this is a lot to think about, so no problem if people are still processing.
I don't know if there's anybody here from Plant Village. They're doing a very interesting project in Kigoma using artificial intelligence to detect pests in maize and cassava in particular, and also now in bananas, which is a huge new threat. So they come out of Penn State University, and they're very, it's a very interesting project. So if there's anybody here from Plant Village or Mboni Avijana or Dream Team, then please let us know and you can tell us more. But I don't know if you've done any research in other areas of Tanzania, such as Kigoma. Cool.
I haven't had the chance. I mean, I would absolutely love to. My younger brother's just moved back to Nairobi to live, and I'm very jealous of his choices. I'm stuck in New Jersey, but I would love to explore more, even within Kilimanjaro region. That it felt like there were lots of places that I wanted to explore more that told different stories. There were, but I think, yeah, to say that even my little stories there could be generalizable, no, because I don't have the same kind of experience of other parts of Tanzania. But hopefully, I think I think it's something I want to continue doing, because this is central to the future of the people of Tanzania. So, thanks for.
I think we should now move on to our next speaker, but thank you again, Paul, and maybe we can all kind of virtually clap or something. So now let's move on to Mr. Geoffrey Kirenga, who is the CEO of the SAGCOT Center and the former director of crop development of the crop development division at the Ministry of Agriculture, to talk a little bit about specifically the current economics of Tanzanian agriculture. I know he was with us online. Mr. Kirenga, are you there?
You might have to make him co-host so that he can talk and share.
Stella, would you mind helping me with that? I don't think I can do that.
Sure. Mr. Kirenga, do you mind typing your Zoom name in the chat?
Okay, now I think I can. Hello,
Yes,
Hi.
we can hear.
my name is Kirenga, and sorry, I was struggling to unmute myself. I was kind of blocked, and I think also the video now is still also blocked.
Blocked. Okay.
Sorry about that. And also sorry everyone for the interruptions earlier. It shouldn't happen again.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Maybe while you're doing that, I'll take this opportunity to thank you, Somnia and the team, also from USDA in Tanzania, for availing me this opportunity to come and meet and talk to you. I've seen a very dynamic and interesting group of young people. By introducing myself, I'm Geoffrey Kirenga. I've been working in agriculture now for more than 25 years. And I've worked with the government in the Ministry of Agriculture, but also I've worked with an organization which is known as SAGCOT. SAGCOT means the Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor of Tanzania. We work in the area which is known as the breadbasket of Tanzania in the Southern Highlands. I know Paul was talking about Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro is in the northern part of Tanzania. Tanzania is almost the size of Texas for those in the United States. But this area that I'm working in, which is the SAGCOT corridor, is almost the size of Italy. So that can give a perspective on how big the country is. And also I would like to tell Paul, what a coincidence, because my parents are coming from Kilimanjaro area. And also not only Kilimanjaro, but also in Rombo area. So I've been sharing pictures and talking on things which are very familiar to me. But unfortunately, I was not able to enjoy Kilimanjaro because they moved and lived in Arusha. And I'm now living in Dar es Salaam in the coast, which is much warmer, not as friendly as Kilimanjaro climate. Having said this, I'd prepared a small PowerPoint presentation, but because I'm not very familiar on how to share it in the Zoom, I'll be talking using that presentation. But I will share it with the team, the organizers, so that they can share with you after this talk. Let me start by saying that just as indicated by Paul, agriculture is one of the most important sector in Tanzania, but also for humanity as a whole. And I like the idea that he shared about Kilimo Kwanza. Kilimo Kwanza was an initiative which was started in 2008, of which the private sector in agriculture in Tanzania engaged the government and developed this idea on how to make agriculture relevant in the country in the way that the public and private sector would have opportunities to work together. And out of that, actually, the initiative that I'm leading now, SAGCOT, was born. And we have been implementing partnership between the public and private sector in Tanzania for almost 10 years. And I'm glad to say that just like the way agriculture was given relevance in the north, but also in the Southern Highlands now is becoming one of the main pillars of agricultural growth in Tanzania. And I should say, almost 65% of the food now is produced in the Southern Highlands. There's sufficient land. Rainfall is also adequate. There is also very good climate, starting from the coastal humid climate to the highlands in the south, which is very temperate in nature. Let me give you a perspective of agriculture, maybe globally. What is now accepted from the various studies which have been conducted, it has been established that the land that has not been developed for agriculture in the world, 60% of that is in Africa. And as the world is inching towards, let's say, 9 to 10 billion people, we have to double production. with that in mind, it's inevitable that we have to develop the agriculture activities in Africa, more so than it has been in the past. While we talk about the global population, we also have to look at what is happening within Africa. By 2050, it's estimated that the population of Africa will be hitting around 2 billion. It will be the most populous region in the world, probably more than China or even more than India, which are the most populous regions of the world at the moment. And also, the majority of the young people in the world will be living in Africa. Maybe the median age will be around 30 years. And that means we are a very dynamic area where there's a lot of opportunities. And I'm glad that here there's plenty of youth. This is an area where you need to look at, and agriculture will definitely play a major role. Coming back home in Tanzania, let me give you a small perspective. Tanzania is in the eastern coast of the African continent, slightly the size of Texas in comparison for those ones who are familiar with the US states. And our population this year has been, we've just done a census, and the population now is 62 million people. And this was 26.9 in 1992. So that can give you an idea on how fast this population is growing. And this is happening not only in Tanzania, but to the rest of the African continent. Food production used to be 5.8 million tons in 1992. And I can say now is hitting around 18 million tons. Agricultural exports at the moment is about 1.2 billion US dollars. This has increased from around average of 400 million in 1992. And the GDP is around 4.9. Those are the general figures. And I like the idea that Paul was talking about the commercial and some information about the food crops. The most important food crops in Tanzania are maize, rice, beans, and cassavas. And also giving you a picture on how many people are involved in these crops. Maize, we have about 7.2 million farmers. Rice, about 2 million farmers. Beans, about 2 million farmers. And cassava also, about 2 million farmers are involved in the production of those crops. We produce about 6.3 million tons of maize per annum, and rice is about 3 million tons, and beans about 1.2, and cassava about 2.5. There are crops which are produced as surplus. This includes maize and rice, and as well as beans. These are becoming very, very important export crops, and therefore we are not only depending on coffee as it used to be in the past. We are also exporting these commodities in the neighboring countries, and some of them have gone also in the international market. Let me talk about the traditional export crops, of which we have coffee, cashew, cotton, tea, sisal, and tobacco. We produce about 225,000 metric tons of cashew nuts. Now coffee, the total production is around 68,000 metric tons annually. Cotton is about 349,000. Tea is about 37,000 metric tons. Sisal about 33,000 metric tons, and tobacco about 71 million tons. Destinations for these crops, for cashew, most of it is sold in India and Vietnam. Coffee is still being taken by Italians. Some of that reaches the US and also Spain. Cotton is sold mostly in Asia, especially China, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. Tea is sold to Pakistan, UK, and US and South Africa. Sisal, most of it is exported to Philippines, and tobacco is bought by the Belgians, Koreans, and also Germans. Recently, just as it was during the Kilimo Kwanza days 10 years ago, I'm glad here to report to you that in April last year, actually the 4th of April last year, there was a program that has been launched, trying to rebrand and revitalize the attention of agricultural investment in Tanzania. This program is known as Agenda 1030. 10 stands for what we want to achieve as the rate of growth from the average of around 4% annually to about 10% when we reach 1030 by year 2030. And also we want to increase the total sales or exports earnings from agriculture from the average of $1.2 billion annually to about $5 billion by 2030. It's a very ambitious program. The presentation, which the PowerPoints that I will be sharing with you, will have some of these figures, and you can see what the ideas behind that. We also have to look at the most important component of our population, which is the youth. And also I'd like to share that last week, we launched a program which is known as Building Better Tomorrow, targeting the youth. And we are using social media and as well as online opportunities to reach to the youth in the country. And so far in the first call of interest to the youth, about 20,000 youths have registered themselves, and the first group of about 800 youth have been registered and have been provided with land, 10 acres of land. And also this land will be specially prepared for investment in a crop that is suitable to a particular area where the land is provided. There will also be installed with irrigation facilities, and water would be coming from the surface sources, but also from the underground waters. The boreholes are being dug, and also containers where water will be stored are also being constructed. The youth will be receiving training in the training centers, agricultural ministry training centers, to understand and get familiar with the basics of agriculture. And from there, they will now be taken to the block farms. And these block farms will be specially designed and facilitated with the necessary issues that the youth will require for them to start engaging in agriculture. It's quite an interesting undertaking. And we are all very keen and interested in doing that. And I'm happy to share that it has been received very positively by the youth. And they will be working with the private sector, which will also being provided with land. And they will be like the aggregators of the crop that is going to be produced by youth. Now, I know I have also to talk about how is Tanzania trading with other countries and what regulations and procedures have been put in place in order to facilitate that. This is quite interesting process. We have import and export regulations addressing issues of especially grain and pulses. These are the most important food crops that we are trading. And we have procedures that have been put in place. For example, if you are a trader, and you know Tanzania is producing surplus rice, for example, about 1 million tons of rice and also about 2 million tons of maize. And this is traded in the region. What you need to do is to obtain an import permit from the Ministry of Agriculture. You have to submit a letter showing the quality, quantity, and the time that you want to deliver and getting this from the source of the grain. You must fill the following condition, which is to have the import license. I'll talk about that later on. But also you have to be registered in the regulatory authority that deals with taxation. Here it's known as Tanzania Revenue Authority. This permit can be valid for 6 months, but also can be renewed. But it's also important to mention here that it costs, and there's no cost attached to it. If you want to export, there are similar conditions which you need to do to comply with, that having the obtaining the export permit from the Ministry of Agriculture, and that is obtained through a letter that shows the quantity and the quality and also where this export will be taking place, which port of exit will be taking place or will be involved, but also you must show the valid export license and also the registration with the taxation authority. No fees involved, and the permit can be valid for 1 month, and it can also be renewed. I talked about the import and export license. This can be obtained from the Ministry of Industry and Trade. You have to complete those forms, and in that process, you have to show the copy of the certificate of incorporation of your business, a copy or any valid identity card, and you have to attach the import license from the country that you're exporting, but also you have to attach the information about your company or your business. And also the import fees involved here are about 400,000 Tanzanian shillings. If you are exporting, the trader must obtain the export permit from the Ministry of Agriculture. And also, you have to pay a fee of about 100,000 with 1 year validity. These are like the basic conditions which you need to follow. And I have to say that in that process, you also, if you are exporting, it's important that you receive the following papers, like certificate of origin. This is obtained from the Tanzania Chamber of Agriculture and Commerce, but also you have to receive standard certificates by the Tanzania Bureau of Standards. And also most countries will require to have a phytosanitary certificate. This is a requirement by almost all countries. And in Tanzania, that is issued by the Ministry of Agriculture. There is a specific institution that does that. And if the importing country will require that commodity to be treated, then you must have a specialist treatment. For example, it can be spraying or application of a fumigant to kill pests. And that is also supervised by the Ministry of Agriculture. Therefore, very quickly, that's what I've shared with you about the describing agriculture at a national level, almost giving you a bird's eye view of what agriculture is like today. And also, if you are interested in trading, importing or exporting, what conditions are there in place that you need to follow. Having said this, let me thank all of you for giving me this opportunity. And I'm glad to be here. If there will be any questions, and I will be more than glad to share with you. Having said this, I will have to say that my organization is not involved in trading, but this is the information that I collected from the people that are involved in import and export of agricultural commodities in Tanzania. Thank you for your attention. Over to you.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful, and looking at the kind of situation of Tanzania in the global context of agriculture and that relationship with markets. So thank you. And are there any questions from the audience, from Youthmappers or other guests? Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. And we're running a little, oh, we have some compliments in the chat, great. So yes, let's move on to the next panel. But if there are any questions for either of our prior panelists, then please feel free to drop them in the chat. Now we have a special treat. It's a panel of former Youthmappers from across the continent. They'll be talking a little bit about their own initiatives in their own communities and how they define success in their communities, and what kinds of components of their projects they found to be especially useful to them. For example, project management, community engagement, or technical skills beyond OSM. So please wave and say hello, Laura Mugeha, Dapile Makulu, Chombo Chachala, Tommy Charles, and Akintola Mercy. if you don't mind just turning your videos on, and maybe Laura, if you want to say hi first, introduce yourself for 5 to 10 minutes.
Sorry?
Would you like to introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your work?
Okay, I can go first. So can I share my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. You can see my slides, yes?
Yes.
Hey, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Mugeha. I am based in Nairobi in Kenya, and I am a geospatial engineer by training, and have previously worked with Youthmapper as a regional ambassador, both in the capacities of an outreach ambassador and an Everywhere She Maps ambassador. But generally, I'm interested when it comes with things to do with open data, free and open source software, and technology and innovation in general. And so for today, I thought to share a bit about going beyond OpenStreetMap. I think as Youthmappers, we tend to work fully on OpenStreetMap, which is a cool platform. We have been able to see all the different amazing and impactful projects around the world, the different communities, including Youthmappers chapters and students who have been able to use this platform in an innovative way. But at times, it's not the perfect tool for everything. When we've done our work, we might have encountered some limitations from time to time. Quick examples would be the OpenStreetMap data model. As we all know, when you're editing on OpenStreetMap, we are only able to use vector data. So we are able to map things like buildings, roads, and points of interest. But when it comes to specific data use cases, this might not be the best data model to use. But also when you're looking into things like tagging, where again, the platform can be a bit limiting, that means that we are also maybe not able to do some of the work that we want to do. And then there are also some things as bias and a representation within the platform, because whoever is mapping or adding features to the map sort of guides what is available on the platform. So when we have these challenges, then I think what that makes us think about is what else is out there that can actually support us to build the solutions that we want. Because remember, the end goal is actually that we are able to use geospatial data and mapping to be able to effect change within our communities. And the good thing is we are not starting from scratch. There are already a number of initiatives that are in place. So we have things like open data initiatives by different organizations and governments, and open data portals like HDX, where individuals and organizations again come in and upload data that they have collected for different projects. And then we have open mapping initiatives like OpenStreetMap, where people come in together to contribute to a platform. And one of these platforms is the Digital Earth Africa platform, which basically is providing analysis-ready data for individuals to be able to use for their different projects and work within their communities. For most of us, if you have done a remote sensing project, you have encountered the problem where you need to go to a platform. Most of the time, people use USGS to go and download gigabytes of Landsat data, which number one takes a lot of space in terms of on your laptop and what you might have for use, and also a lot of data. But what the Digital Earth Africa platform provides is actually cloud-based data that you do not need to download on your laptop. And that means you can access it and do your analysis on the web. And you can access this platform in a number of ways. We provide the slides afterwards, and you can go through it and access the different ways that you can use the platform. And good thing is, because it's also an open mapping platform, an open source platform, we have a lot of resources and also a learning guide that you can use, which is the link that is at the bottom. And within Youthmappers, this is not the first time that we are talking about Digital Earth Africa. I think we've had a number of sessions on this. And last year, we did launch the Digital Earth Africa and Youthmapper's Technical Challenge, where we invited chapters to submit proposals that are related to community development, but those proposals would include workflows on how they can use the Digital Earth Africa platform. And out of that, 4 chapters were selected within Africa. So we had a chapter in Malawi, one in Uganda, one in Sierra Leone, and one in Tanzania. So yeah, shout out to Tanzania, even as they are hosting us here today. And these chapters were selected in January, and they have been working to implement these projects, and they also did receive funding to implement these projects. And a lot of times, I guess we tend to go directly into OpenStreetMap and start thinking about what can I use OpenStreetMap for? But I think when you start from that angle, that's what usually locks us out in terms of what tools and platforms you can use. And maybe from time to time, we tend to forget to consider what also is available out there that might actually be better for our projects. Or even we can still work with OpenStreetMap, but we can use another platform or another data source to complement our project or OpenStreetMap. So I tend to encourage people to look into the Sustainable Development Goals and start from the problem, design a solution, and then think about how geospatial data and mapping would help you to create the solution that you're trying to create to use to solve your problem. And if OpenStreetMap would be the best solution in that case, then that's where it would work. And to close it off, also thought about to talk a bit about gender equality. In as much as when you look at the SDGs, we have an SDG that's focused on gender equality, which is SDG 5. One thing about gender equality is that it runs through each of the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you look into, say, for example, education, it is gendered in how that affects or how the problem is being faced around the world. If you look into healthcare, the same. So we cannot sort of ignore it, but we need to look into what we can do when solving each of these other challenges. And since I guess for this project you're talking about agriculture, you might be wondering, how does gender equality intersect with the agricultural space? So I think for most of us, even within our community, we might have seen that that there are gendered roles and responsibilities in the agricultural sector. And these are shaped by cultural, social, and economic factors. And this ends up resulting to unequal access to resources, information, decision-making, and power. For example, I'll use an example in Kenya. You'll notice that women are usually responsible for labor-intensive activities such as planting, weeding, and harvesting, but may have limited access to land, credit, and technology. And this ends up limiting their productivity and income. And then maybe for men, on the other hand, you might notice that they might have more control over marketing, the sale of the crops, decision-making related to agricultural investments and policies. So what this then means is that we tend to limit what women and girls can do to in the agricultural space. So what can we do about it? We can start by empowering women and promoting gender equality in agriculture, and this might mean increasing access to land for farming for women and girls, and also increasing access to things like finances and loans that can enable them to purchase agricultural inputs, so things like fertilizers and even seeds and the rest. And when we do that, we'll notice that there is improved agricultural productivity, there's more efficient use of resources, and women are also part of these communities, so there'll be increased incomes within all these communities. And lastly, it's not always on the
Laura, I can't.
Project bit of it, members also. And then we're also engaging them in different areas of the project phases. So not just maybe in brainstorming, but also in field mapping and data analysis and the rest. And also we can also create asset maps for services and resources. So when it comes to things like market centers, water sources, which are also key in the agricultural space. So I will stop there for today.
Thank you so much, Laura. And let's hold all the questions until after all five speak. So maybe we can have Tommy next.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible enough?
Yes, we can hear you clear.
Okay. My name is Tommy Charles. I'm a current Youthmapper. I'm a Youthmapper. I'll always be a Youthmapper. I have served as a Youthmapper regional ambassador in Sierra Leone and Liberia, and I'm also the national coordinator of OpenStreetMap Sierra Leone. Okay, so I'll be discussing inter-chapter collaboration in Youthmappers led projects. So basically, I'll be using the methods that we use doing the power grid mapping in Sierra Leone and other projects we've implemented over the years. So let's go. So I'll give you an overview of this presentation. It's going to be in 3 phases. The first one is establishment and training. The second one is going to be on transfer of knowledge. And then the third one is going to be project collaboration. So in Sierra Leone, we have 5 Youthmappers chapters, and these chapters they cut across the country, one in the north, one in the west, the east, the south, and the central part of the country. So the Youthmappers chapters here are spread out, like they are everywhere, in every region of the country, and we are hoping to expand more. Normally, when we establish Youthmappers chapters, the first thing that we do, the first set of things that we do, we capacitate them with technical training. And these training include, for start, the ID editor and the HOT taxing manager. And recently we started going through rapid with them once we established these chapters. Before I progress, I would like to say good luck to the Youthmappers that will be implementing this project in Tanzania, and I hope they'll learn a lot from the presentations that are going to be made here. So let me continue. So firstly, we train them on armchair mapping, how to use these tools. And then we move on to training them how to engage in field mapping using these tools, Kobo Toolbox, OSM and Mapillary, field papers, and map reading. We teach them how to read maps, and we teach them how to utilize these tools. So this is basically like the foundation for these Youthmappers chapters. So this is what they start off with, and then they grow from there. So normally when we establish chapters, we give them this responsibility. These are basically the method through which we make sure that they transfer the knowledge that the core membership here alone impact into them. So we have like a knowledge learning and sharing mantra, which we encourage every member of a Youthmappers chapter or the lead members to inculcate and also practice. So the first thing is we always expect Youthmappers chapters to establish relationship with other tertiary institutions, and then we encourage them to conduct training for these other tertiary institutions, and then also coordinate with them to establish new chapters. So basically, this was how it happened. So when we established the first Youthmappers chapter, that I was one of the co-founders in 2017 when I was in college. So the next thing we did was we collaborated with another university, that's the Jalais University, and then we facilitated the establishment of the chapter on that campus. And then we did also with UNIMAC, and then that was where the cycle actually took took shape. Excuse me. Can I proceed?
Please proceed.
Okay. So they in turn started to train students at the Canadian College, Central University, and then the Central University students, and they help us to establish the Youthmappers chapter at the Eastern Technical University, which was the youngest chapter that was selected for the Digital Art Prize. And then when we in terms of transferring this knowledge, we go through these methods. So firstly, the core members of these Youthmappers chapter, they implement this process, they establish communication modes, most times on WhatsApps, like let's say students who meet at a common event, either at a debate, a seminar, and then they pitch the idea of Youthmappers to their colleagues who do not have Youthmappers chapter. And then these Youthmappers will create WhatsApp group, or they keep communicating, and then they adopt dates and put logistics in place for training. And then after the training, they establish knowledge learning and sharing relationship with them. And that is how actually they kickstart their relationship. And then now, where we actually collaborated, where we actually encourage students to collaborate. So firstly, after we've given them the prerequisite skill, and then we've made sure that they've met with students from other chapters, they've established that relationship, that learning and learning relationship. And then now when we get projects, in order to implement this project, this is normally what we do. These can happen like in 3 phases. So the supervisor, like members, core members of the OpenStreetMap community and Youthmappers alumni like myself, and we act as supervisors, and then we start the project's implementation with chapters in good standing, which I'll discuss my next slide. And then these Youthmappers that we selected and that have good standing, we encourage them to keep working with us as we move on to implement the project in another location in the second phase. So they are always there to help us replicate what they learned to their fellow Youthmappers. And also these Youthmappers, since they established the connection, they share information relating to stakeholders and regional membership. So I'll discuss these points now in the coming slides. So when we say chapters in good standing, chapters with members that have all the prerequisite skills for the project. So like, for instance, when we were doing the power grid mapping, we initially did like a skills assessment, like let's see what are these students capable of doing, and what can we do to put them at par with others? What can we do to put them at speed with the project? So that was what we did. We made sure that these students or these chapters had individuals within their membership that could use the tools that we are going to use, like ID editor, Mapillary, field papers, pics for the Mapillary verification tool by then. So we had to make sure that they had all these skills. And then replication. So once we started the training, let's say in a pilot phase, okay, the chapters, we start by implementing the project with the chapters. And then they go out, let's say, for instance, students were using Mapillary to collect ground level images within townships across Sierra Leone. So the first set of students, they actually did the field work. They had their smartphones or GoPro cameras. And then these GoPro cameras were either attached to motorcycles, or they were held in their hands family, and then they move around. And some of them encountered a few issues, questions from community members, you know. Some of them had to interact with stakeholders. So they in turn were with us. And then when we were about to implement the projects in other locations with other Youthmappers from other chapters, they were there to actually give them guidance to say, okay, this is how you can go about it. If you're asked this type of question, this is how you can engage stakeholders. This is how you can engage with motorcycle riders. So they were there actually to transfer the experience they had from the first phase or during the pilot of the project to others. So this can be very beneficial because sometimes students can relate more with themselves when they're involved as compared to when they're seniors or someone who's a graduate or part of the project's implementation. So that is actually what they did. They replicated what they learned and then made sure that they transferred this knowledge to their fellow students in other chapters. Information sharing, so regional balance, connection with stakeholders and logistics. In terms of this, like when we say regional balance, like I said earlier on, we have Youthmapper chapters in all the provinces across Sierra Leone from the east, west, north, and south. So sometimes we had this issue of wherein you have student Youthmappers in the south. Maybe they do not have, maybe we are working in 5 communities in the south, and then we have a Youthmapper chapter in the south, let's say Jala University, but they do not have enough members that could go out to those locations in the south. And then fortunately, we have Youthmapper's chapter, wherein they have members that are from the south who can navigate well. Because one thing we took into consideration was that we selected Youthmappers to work in communities that they were au fait with, to work in communities wherein they could speak the local language, or worst case scenario, they could understand or relate well with people. So once we wanted people of that met those criteria, we had to reach out to other Youthmapper chapters to see if they can suggest individuals within their chapter with the prerequisite skills to embark on such projects. So we had those collaboration where Youthmappers suggested individuals that could work well in communities out of the region where their Youthmapper chapters were located. We had few of those instances. This basically created a regional balance between during the course of the implementation process. And also, of course, these chapters, the initial chapters, had to give advice to the Youthmappers membership of those that we are about to implement in terms of how to encourage inclusion, make sure that people from different backgrounds were part of the process, and also connecting with stakeholders. So some of the Youthmappers actually already had established relationship with stakeholders within certain communities. So they actually collaborated with these stakeholders and also these youth leaders across the country for them to give authorization to map, authorization to stay within the community. And also in terms of logistics, so they were able to help one another in terms of getting accommodation, transportation within those communities that they work. These also related to the facility, the accommodation, how comfortable they were, the transportation, how to communicate or relate or connect them with reliable transportation personnel. So basically, this is basically how we encouraged inter-chapter collaboration, and then it was quite successful to a larger extent because Youthmappers up to now, they still have the relationship that they built. So for instance, we had Youthmappers that were selected for the Youthmappers Fellowship, and they were from 3 different Youthmappers chapters. And upon their return, they've been able to invite one another to their chapters to give presentations about the things that they learned. So it is very essential to ensure that Youthmappers chapters within a country actually have a common interest of collaborating and also learning and sharing between one another. So I think I'll stop here for now. If there are questions that I can address, please feel free to shoot them. So I'll end this presentation for now with the Youthmappers mantra, which is we don't just build maps, we build mappers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shami. That was great. And thank you for sharing your personal experience with that. Do we have any volunteers for the next speaker?
Laura's hand is up.
Let's save the questions for the end after all 5 have spoken, and then we can take questions all at once, just to make sure that we're good on time.
Okay, thank you.
I can go next.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I hope everybody can see my screen. Okay. All right. Awesome. So my name is Ndapili Nko. I'm a former regional ambassador who was serving under the Everywhere She Maps initiative, and also an instructional service manager at the African Journal Data Academy. That today I'm here to share with everyone on project mapping, and the case study is going to be on the Dzaleka refugee camp project that we conducted. So I also a co-founder of Map Malawi, and this particular project was under this NGO. Okay. So here's just a brief overview of what we're going to go through. So again, we're going to talk about the project itself, and then I'm just going to break down some of the steps that are very essential when it comes to project management, and also making sure that the project that you're operating in is a success at the end of the day. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, the Dzaleka project mapping is under Map Malawi, and Map Malawi was established in 2020. And this organization is co-founded by 2 Youthmappers alumni. So myself and Zola Manyungwa. I'm pretty sure that some people on the call know Zola. So this project was funded by the Facebook Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Community Impact micro grant, and basically what this project was aiming to do was to just generate geospatial data to show the extent to which people that are residing in the refugee camp have access to different amenities, because initially the camp was built to host 10,000 people, but as we're speaking, it hosts more than that. So that does bring in certain implications, and the project was just there to sort of give a spatial perspective on how these amenities are accessible to the residents at the camp. So some of the tools that were used to implement this project were drones. So the drones were just there to capture the imagery, to assist in the digitization of the different features that we're looking at. We also did integrate the use of OpenStreetMap and other geospatial technologies. So this is things like QGIS for map making. We did work with two youth-based groups. So one group is based at the camp itself, because we understand how important it is to work with the communities that intimately know the problems that you're trying to solve. So we did opt to work with a group that's based in the camp, and also another group that either has been part of Youthmappers or is just familiar with the use of different geospatial technologies. So we did engage them in different parts of the project itself. So here's just a brief overview on the different tools. Again, we use drones. So the drones were there to collect the imagery, and we try to collect imagery with crisp resolution, because the camp setup is very tightly packed. So we knew that if we're going to use satellite imagery for digitization, we're going to produce the best results. So that's why we opted to use the drones. In terms of the digitization, we did use the hot tasking manager so that we could reach out to different groups to help us in actually finishing the project. So we did work with the hot data interns. We worked with different people from all over the globe because of the use of the hot tasking manager. In terms of editing, people were using ID editor, or those that were comfortable with JOSM were also using JOSM. So the features that we're digitizing were mainly the buildings themselves. And in as much as the the digitization was a big part of the project. We also needed to go on the ground to collect, to do some kind of ground truthing. So we're collecting coordinates of schools, we're collecting coordinates of hospitals, police stations, so the different services that we're trying to look at in terms of accessibility and the features that we know are very essential when it comes to, I guess, the well-being of somebody when they're living their lives. And the ground truthing itself was done by 2 of the Dzaleka refugee residents. So we did have a training with them so that they're able to use Kobo Collect to do the ground truthing itself. And yeah, we ended it with creating a map that was basically showing the accessibility. So the lessons that were learned from this particular project is that there's a need for quick adaptation, because most of the times you have this plan, but there are a lot of things that are going to come to you. So it's always very important to have a plan B. Also, community involvement and partnership is very key when it comes to project success. And I think Tommy has touched a little bit on this, on how important it is to involve the community and also have different partnerships, because there's some doors that you as a group can't open, but because of the connections and networking that you've been doing, you're able to do so. And I think this was pretty evident when it came to us trying to acquire an authorization to fly over Dzaleka. Seeing as to how Dzaleka is a protected area, we needed to go through Homeland Security, and we did get assistance to get this authorization from our different partners. And it's also very, it was very interesting to note that a lot of the youth are very eager to learn about the different technologies and the applications that are out there. So once people learn, they are very eager to actually implement them in some of the different project ideas that they have. So when we're working with the different groups, at the end of the day, after training them in using OSM, we did ask them to brainstorm and think of ideas in which they could have OSM as a tool. So they did come up with a security project where they were talking about wanting to map out street lights to just sort of have an idea on how light up the community is, because this also then translates to how secure the community is. So those are just some of the learning points that we got from trying to implement this particular project. Of course, this is just a brief overview. So now I'm just going to generalize on how somebody can implement a project, assuming you want to do that. So the most important thing could be these 4 points that are down here. So there's the cycle time and lifespan, there's the planning itself, there's the team management, and then there's the communication management. When we're talking about the cycle plan, so this is just the cycle time rather, this is just how much time you think the project is going to take. So it's very important for you to be able to predict that accurately. So you should be at least within 10%, because at the end of the day, you have deliverables. If you're operating using a grant, then you have a timeline that you submitted and you need to stay within this, because at the end of the day, we have different milestones that we have to hit. So it's very important to have a very precise cycle time, because again, you have goals to meet. So the different set of activities are scheduled, and sometimes you have reports that are due based on the deliverables and the milestones that you have. And it's also important to know that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, right? So make sure that you have a schedule and you have a plan and the activities are well connected efficiently. Another thing that's very important is the basic planning. So in order to plan activities, there are a couple of questions that you should be asking yourself. So what is the scope of the project? What are you trying to achieve from the project? Because if you don't understand exactly what you're trying to achieve, it could be really hard to set up teams to work towards the different goals. So make sure you understand the scope of the project, and you also know the skills that your team members have, because this will help you in breaking down the project and giving everybody different assignments so that you're able to achieve what you want to achieve. And also you can effectively coordinate. If you know that somebody's great at machine learning or somebody's great at something else, then they could be the team lead for that particular segment of the project. If somebody's great at doing trainings, then you could have them be the team lead for maybe training some of the individuals that you're planning to involve in your project. It's also important to know what your deliverables are at the end of the day, and also what resources do you have, because you could have this very extravagant project, but because you don't have the right resources, you could be limited, and the final product could not be what you guys were expecting because you really didn't look at the resources that you have at hand. So make sure you also have that in mind when you're planning. And also, in most cases, we're not the first people that are doing that project. So make sure that you do enough research and know what projects you could refer to so that you can borrow a leaf or two from these particular projects. And in most cases, you can improve on it, you contextualize it, because again, something that was done in Zambia doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to fit really well in Malawi. So we need to contextualize that, despite the fact that we're looking at other projects and trying to borrow leaves from it. Team management is also very important. So just, again, look back at your experiences in working with teams. I know we're too quick to say that, oh, I work great in teams up until we have to work in teams. So make sure that you know yourself and make sure that you can nicely handle yourself, assuming you're the team lead. You need to know whether you're a good leader or maybe you work best as just a team member. And there's nothing wrong with being either one, right? It's just a matter of knowing yourself and knowing what kind of environment you work best in. And also, like, what makes an effective team. Because you could have great individuals, but if they cannot work together, then again, the project is not going to be a success. So you need to know the characteristics that eventually make an effective team. There are a couple that are in the illustration down there. So there's great communication, great leadership. There needs to be a trust and mutual respect. And also you need to know how to manage conflict. You need to know who's an introvert, who's an extrovert, so that again, you're creating a safe environment for everyone when it comes to them opening up and sharing project ideas and how to do certain things. And again, also clear goals are very important. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dapila. That was a very applicable presentation. So I'm sure a lot of us took away guidelines for moving forward with our own projects. And who would like to go next?
It's okay. I will go next.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to stop sharing my screen. All right, thank you.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to be talking about, I'll be sharing my experience on data management on a project we did here in Nigeria, like mapping out access to electricity in Nigeria. Yeah. So my name is Mercy Akintola Onopempo. I'm the Youthmapper Children Ambassador. I'm based in Nigeria, and I'm studying remote sensing and GIS at the Federal University of Technology, Akure, here in Nigeria. So I'm a member of the Earth Training Working Group and also the community manager at MISA Technology in Nigeria. And I support OSM Africa Monthly Mapathon and always ready to volunteer to open projects. I love mapping, having the MapPD. Okay. So today's section, I'll be focusing more on this 5 points, which is data collection, data processing, data reporting, data sharing, and give a conclusion. So everything is going to be related to the project we carried out here in Nigeria, mapping out more of transformers to provide electricity. Okay, introduction. Data management play a critical role in field mapping, especially when dealing with a large data set and complex analysis. This was when we are carrying out a project in Nigeria, mapping out transformers trying to communicate to the communities why they don't have light, and telling also the organization in charge of the electricity to provide them transformer so that they can have light in that community. So I'll be relating everything to data management, because data management practice helps us to ensure accuracy, completeness, and consistency of data, and leads to better performance of decisions and improve outcomes. Okay, first one is data collections. Why are we collecting the data? To give more information about any features through survey, through observation and measurement. So we need to carry out some technicals in collecting feed data. That's we make use of GPS and also mobile phone to collect data collections on the field, store information about the data you're collecting on the field. And we use paper survey and form, and also drone to check out the areas. So this is a picture showing us when we are collecting the data on field. This is the process of collecting the data where mappers goes out to collect every point of transformers where we have grid and so on. So data quality controls procedures should be put in place to ensure data and integrity and accuracy. While collecting these data, we make use of Kobo Collect. So, okay, after collecting data, we did data processing. So every mappers come together to download the data that we have collected on field. We process it. So while processing it, we find out that some mappers collect duplicate data. So we ensure to clean the data up, not for us to have two data sets in that particular area. And we make use of QGIS to clean some data, and we also make use of Excel. We download an Excel format to check, and we clean the data to avoid duplications and to ensure that the data are on same scales. And also, we also validate the data. Okay, so and the next one is data reporting. Now, when carrying out a data, you need to do a report. So what information did this data have? That's in terms of communicating to people in the community, in terms of showing a chart, showing a map, showing a visualizations of how these data have been used. So this is when we come together, all the mappers come together in the hub and to do a report on the data. Why, when the data was cleaned, we now analyze it, we visualize it. And so this was when we are doing that. So to tell ourselves, to know where it's where without getting there, to know where the data are gotten without others being there. So that is the data reporting. So now it is where I am sharing the data, like data sharing. So for the community who are in need of those data can make use of it. So here we share the data with the community, which they carried out to explain to them what has been causing the issues, why there's no light in some particular environment, and to ensure they do some installations of transformers in those communities. So these are parts where we share the data, we communicate to them, and we show the potential use of those data. Okay. Conclusion. So the conclusion is just to understand the importance of the data management in feed and trying to collect feed data in best practice to ensure that you are there, and to ensure accuracy and completeness, and that's to ensure that every details you are collecting on field are accurate and know exactly what you see, you input, not your imagination. Okay, so it's exactly what you see on field, you input, and we ensure to do a data processes of those feed data. So we try and clean it, we validate it, and check that okay, it's good in ends to go out there. So we also generate maps and validations to communicate the data effectively, and we collaborate with professionals in field of geospatial analysis and So for this meeting is for the agriculture. So we ensure to have an agricultural line to have more support and to understand the agricultural career development in terms of feed data collections. Okay, so Youthmappers, we do not just build maps, we build mappers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mercy.
I guess we have Chomba last on community engagement and partnerships. I also know that so many questions have been coming towards that, so we hope that Chomba, you reinforce that part. Chomba.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Let me try and change. Okay. Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. Thanks very much. My name is Chombachara from Zambia, former Youthmapper region ambassador, and I also support Youthmappers here in Zambia. Currently, I'm working on the project with the Humanitarian Partnership Map team here in Zambia, where we are mapping three provinces. We are focusing on the service delivery, so we are mapping anything that has to do with livelihood of people in Chinga, that's northern part of the country, and central part of the country, and eastern part of the country. So I've been in this project for 2 years now. So I'm just trying to share my experience, and me and my colleague have been leading on this project. We are the senior mapping supervisor. I think most of the people that have talked about time, also I think Laura also touched on the importance of knowing the tools that are going to be used even before implementing the project. And we understand that this project is going to be implemented in an area where the community are working from, or where the community lives. So my first step is just to talk about time. It's very, very important as we implement the project that you look at the time frame that you have. As much as I know we might think that we do have time, but in implementing a project, if you have not planned it very well. So I would urge youth mappers that are involved in this project to make sure that you are taking interest in make sure that you plan accordingly. But as much as you plan, you have to make sure that you also be flexible, because planning and implementing, it's implementing the project like on the field, it's totally different. You can plan, but once you go into the field, you find that there are certain things that you thought they were the correct things, but when you go into the field, because you're working with the community, and the community will start telling you other the reality of their way of doing things. So that's where now you need to make sure that you adjust according to the time that you have. So I think I'll draw more on the partnership and stakeholder engagement. So the first thing I think that we did in this project, where we are mapping service delivery in Zambia, was we identified partnerships or partners that we are going to work with. So we looked at who are those that are direct involved in service delivery provision. And then we also looked at if we want to achieve our project, there is a need of making sure that we engage partners that are also in line with the project. So for example, you are doing a project to do with agriculture. We are talking about people in the civil society, organization, including governments. So when you bring these people together, they're also going to even give their experience, their expertise. Not only that, we're also going to look at the issue to do with secondary data, even data that you're going to collect with your desk on your desk data. So these are the people that are also going even to give you certain information even before you go into the field. I'm sure that there's certain information that we'd want to have even before we start data collection. So this partnership that you're going to create, they are the one that are going to give you this information that will help you to implement your project. So partnership is very, very important. So first of all, identify all the partners that you can work with, engage with them, communicate with them. Thereafter, when you discover this partnership, then you need to make sure also to have a stakeholder engagement. In this stakeholders engagement, you are meeting both the people that are going to work with at the grassroots as well as at the higher level. I'm talking about maybe on the provincial or district level. You have to make sure that you engage with those people, have meeting with them, discuss your ideas, and listen to them on how you can implement your project. Because I know that we want to map these agriculture sectors, but there are certain components that even the local leaders, it can be the village headmans, like in the district officials that deals with agriculture, would want also you in your projects to talk on. So it's very, very important that we have this stakeholders engagement so that they also submit their view on the project. This will help us to smoothly run our project at the end of the day. So this thing has helped us, and time to time we are able to engage this partnership as the project is going. We have produced a lot of maps which we also have shared with them. At the end of the day, we have seen that when we were implementing the project, especially last year, we discovered that those partners that we had, we were able to even sell out our project to other partners. So it is also a way of making your project known within the areas that you are working with, also even outside the areas that you are working with. A lot of people have started receiving a lot of calls, and people also want us to do the same project in other provinces. So because of the partnership that we had, the partnership that we have, this has helped us also our project to be known, and we have also attended meetings because of the partnership that we have developed and showcased the project that we have. I know this is a project for Youthmappers, so this is the time that even those government officials that are into agriculture or private sectors that are into agriculture, this is the time that they should hear about us. And this is the time that we should sell our idea so that it can be even scalable to other areas within Tanzania and outside Tanzania. So it's very, very important that you start a partnership. And this partnership, it can be only in Tanzania or even outside. There are people that have done research like the first presenter. Those are the people that we need to look at who can help us, including even connections, because we are going to implement this project in the villages. I know we're going to the field. So through this partnership, that's where we can get contacts of the people that we are going to work with. And it's very, very important also to have people who you are going to be like the focal point people in it can be either at the provincial, the district level that are going to be speaking with, that will be helping you in all communications. I think from that, I rest my case. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chamba. I think that did speak to a lot of the themes that came through with other presentations, so much appreciated. And now it's time for questions. So maybe what we can do is, while you all type your questions in the chat, we can go through some of the prior questions. So here's one from Janet. Can community groups in other areas be involved in the agriculture project? Do you mean the specific project, Janet, or what do you mean by that?
Yes, I meant the ground truthing for agriculture project.
I will let Stella handle that.
Thank you, Janet. Yes, that's an amazing question. And sorry, I've been trying to overcome the amazing presentations that all people have made on this platform. And I really hope that Youthmappers in Tanzania undertaking this pilot crowdsourcing project are really listening and taking notes and hopefully fired up immediately after this engagement, that a lot is going to change and a lot of involvement is going to increase for you different chapters in Tanzania. I would say I can call on Eric to speak directly into that, but on a Youthmapper scale, Youthmappers usually are at liberty to engage all community groups as they may find suitable for a given project that they are engaged in and as resources might permit them. So Eric, would you love to say something?
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think you're correct there, Stella. Yeah, so there are different Youthmappers that will be engaged in this project as we started on 18th, helping them to have the skills on remote mapping or introducing the project at large. So by this, I think we will be engaging some community groups that are like on the let's say the case study areas in Mwanza, Arusha, and Dodoma. So looking forward and expecting to have, if there are community groups that you know in those areas, I'd love to have contact with so that we can engage them through the project. And yeah, I think there are a lot of presentations made and yeah, from different parts. And this is a like take home for Youthmappers chapters in Tanzania to come up and see, learn from also those works and engage their communities through this project or any project that they want to create. And as Youthmappers, we are here to support you on those works that you're doing. And yeah, thank you so much, Stella. Hope that answered the question. Back to you, Soumya.
Thank you, Stella and Eric and Janet. Now we have a question from Edmund. I think the first two questions were addressed, but I think, so a question that he has is, what systems for data sharing have been put forward after projects? And I think that question, generally speaking, is a good one, right? How are we sharing our data after we do these projects and how is that being used? So I don't know if any of the panelists have thoughts on that. And also actually building off of that accuracy of that data.
Mercy and Apile, Laura.
Yeah, let me try to go first on the data sharing. I think one most important thing is once the data is collected and everything is done, is to share with the people that we are interested in, like the audience, because the project has to a focal point where the data is supposed to go. In this case, we are talking about the Ministry of Agriculture and other organizations, as well as like the community, like the way we have come. I think we would want to hear the product of this project at the end of the day. So we would want to have a meeting like this where I think certain data will be uploaded to OSM at the end of the day so that people can have access to it. I think that's that's how we've been sharing the data. For example, in our case here in Zambia, we have been uploading the data that we've been collecting, such as the bore, kiosk, farms, water treatment to OpenStreetMap. So everyone can have access to that. Also, on the issue of data quality, we have conducted data validation with the authorities. We are talking about the planners, we're talking about agriculture people. So it's very important that at the end of the day, when you collect this information, you have this validation workshop where data is validated, and then everyone is happy to say, okay, this data is accurate. If it's not accurate, then you need to have a mechanism. Even before implementing this project, you need to put certain mechanism that to make sure that the data that is going to be produced will be accurate. So we're talking about training people, making sure that we choose the right people to collect the information, when you are communicating to people who are going to the ground, you don't have to make sure that you complicate things too much, things that are not going to be understandable. Make sure that you relate with the community. At the end of the day, when you do all these things, you find that you have good quality of data. Yeah, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chumba. That was great. I don't know if any of the other panelists have anything to add to that.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to add to what Chumba said. So I'll be answering the third questions. That's the accuracy system proposed for better selection for all data to be inserted. So when collecting data on field, it's always better to have an accuracy of 5 meters below. So to ensure that you are exactly at that position where you are. So sometimes when you are trying to collect your data on field, you just click on the icon to just show your location, you not look at the accuracy. So when you are now trying to validate the data, you now find out that the data is somewhere else. So always have it in mind to have 5 meters below when you are collecting your data for accuracy, for a better accuracy on field. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mercy. Let's hear from Laura. Stella, would you mind unmuting?
Laura, should be able to unmute.
Yeah, it's okay now. Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Chumba and Mercy have shared, because a lot of times, because you're working in the open data space, I think it's also important to think about data sensitivity. Not everything that we do collect for our projects can be shared. And I wanted to share this quote within the open data space that says, as open as possible and as close to necessary. Especially when you're working with communities and you're collecting personal data, if you're working in agriculture, maybe you end up collecting land ownership information. You have to think about what components of that can be shared and can be uploaded in things like OpenStreetMap and open data portals, and leave out any information that can be compromising or can affect someone within the community negatively. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Any other thoughts on this, or should we move on? If you could, Apollinary, if you could type your question into the chat, because I think the unmuting process is a bit complicated. So just please type your question and I'll make sure that I say it out loud.
Yeah, also there are a few that I can read that I see. One, I think this goes to Mr. Kirenga from Mohammed. He says he's concerned how mapping in GIS can help meet the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030 that ensure good arrangement of residents, as well as promoting planned environment for economic activities like agriculture.
So actually, unfortunately, Mr. Kirenga had to leave a little bit early. But if anyone else wants to address that question, then please feel free.
What's the question again?
How does mapping and GIS help meet the Sustainable Development Goals? That's the summary of the question. I'm trying to summarize the question. Yes. How does mapping and GIS help to meet the Sustainable Development Goal? If somebody can talk about it in the context of the Youthmappers community, that would be amazing. And I'm also wondering if Mohammed Kibamba, you're part of any chapter or you've been a member of any chapter. Such notes should be really prevalent in your engagement.
Hey, Stella, would you mind just maybe changing the mute feature? Because I think Laura and Chad want to contribute.
Okay.
Perfect. I don't think we'll be Zoom bombed again.
Chad, you can speak now.
Oh, wow.
That's network.
Sorry, can I go as Chad comes back?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think mapping and GIS are very critical, what do you call it, technologies and platforms that are very key to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Because if you look at the SDGs, they are mainly these 17 goals that are affecting, that sort of outline all the challenges that we do face in the world. But you can see that they are generalized in a way. So say, for example, you have education, you have food insecurity, but all these problems look different in different locations around the world. For example, an education problem in Tanzania is not the same in the USA. So maybe, for example, in Tanzania, you might find that the challenge is maybe access to early childhood education, and maybe in the US, it's maybe access to university education. Maybe on that side of the world, it's too expensive. So what this shows us is that we cannot have one general solution for the entire world. And we are only able to understand locations and create solutions for specific locations by using geospatial information, data, and technology. And it's not even just countries and that we can sort of differentiate these things. Even within our countries, the way we face problems within urban centers is not the same in rural areas. A good example would also be maybe in water and sanitation. Maybe in more rural areas, it's just the lack of accessibility in general. Maybe there are fewer water sources. And then maybe in urban centers, maybe the bigger problem is sewerage systems that are maybe non-existent or over-empowered. So I think what GIS and mapping does in this space is just bringing in the perspective of location, looking into smaller areas on how challenges are affecting these areas, and then that then pushes us to create specific locations for specific solutions for these locations. And I think this is key in within Youthmappers. There's a book that was published last year on Springer, which basically outlines how different chapters have been using geospatial technology and mapping to achieve the SDGs and on different projects. And what you'll notice with this is also just how the solutions are localized, and there are chapters even that cover maybe one single SDG, but showing how different Youthmappers have used GIS and mapping to solve that challenge and how it looks different in different contexts. I will I will shout myself out, and for example, the first chapter when we're talking about sustainable communities and cities, and you're talking about informal settlements in Rwanda, Kenya, and in Italy. And if you read through that first chapter, you'll just notice how it's all different and how the solutions are totally different because they're matching what those locations look like and how problems in those locations look like. Yeah.
Excellent. I believe Mr. Kibamba now has a clear overview. Also, thanks to Raya for sharing the link to the Springer book. It's in the chat. Feel free to click, and it's freely accessible. So you can access and do an in-depth exploration of what students have done and how you can also utilize some of that information to make extra contributions and also to this specific project for the sake of your chapter. Yes, Edmond, your hand is up.
I wanted to add some notes on that question asked on the mapping in GIS and the issue of sustainable development. I think most of the organizers, the different stakeholders and different organizations, they are facing some issue of where the problem is. Maybe in case of agriculture, most of the stakeholders, they face some issue of knowing where the issue of agricultural development is. So I think knowing where is our work. It's our work as a GIS expert. Where should they find the problem? Where should they go to solve the problem? So the case of mapping, it provides the solution of where the problem is. I think even in agriculture, if we show the issue of classification, maybe showing the trend of agriculture from 2000 to recently, I think also show the stakeholders of agriculture where the agriculture development is declining. So I think we as other GIS experts on mapping, we need to show where the problem is so the stakeholders can solve the problems. I think from the really meaning of GIS, of geospatial solution, is that we solve the real world problems, but we are not going direct to solve the problem, but we show where the real world problem is. So after showing where the real problem is, the stakeholders can go direct and solve the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund. That was precise. Okay. Any extra questions in the chat?
We can unmute you now if you want to raise your hand. So please feel free to just raise your hand if you have any questions or thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to add on what's been said, the relationship between GIS and SDGs. I think one day we were in the meeting and someone asked the question, say, when you're presented with a map, what do you see? How do you define a map? What is a map? Yeah, people define a map, or let me say, because at the end of the day, when you talk about GIS, people think about a map. So I've come to realize to say, at the end of the day, what GIS does is it opens up the lock-in issues that we have in the communities. As Laura said, when you talk about issues to do with people have access to water, we talk about people have access to food in agriculture. People will say they do not have food in that area. So what is the problem? So when you talk about GIS, try now to go and find the truth. So it's a tool that brings out the truth, and out of that truth, that's where now decision making comes in. And these also decision making is the one that are now trying to help to achieve the sustainable development goals. So for me, a GIS is a tool that showcase even how we are moving toward attaining the SDGs. We're talking about issues to do with agriculture, issues to do with even poverty, issues to do with health. We can do the analysis of how many kilometers of people are walking just to access health. At the end of the day, when you do that, when you present this information maybe to the government, they can be able to react and maybe even build a new clinic or a new health post. It means that we are getting toward the universal access to health. So I think GIS is a tool that also can help even to measure even the SDGs that we have tried to move towards attaining it. Yes, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I think everyone's making really great points about the role of GIS as a tool that can be applied in all these different ways. Any other questions in the audience? If not, for those panelists who are comfortable with sharing their emails for potential questions in the future, then please do so people can reach out to you if you want to. We're also at time, so I think we can close here. Stella, what do you think?
Sure. Just to summarize, I'll just get us through the entire project of the crowdsource, the pilot project that is going down in Tanzania. And just to re-echo that Youthmappers are at the center of this project. Just like the presentations that the different panelists have made are a clear indication that students, wherever you are, you don't need to be called upon, or this is not a project that Eric should be doing by himself. Rather, it's a contribution and a coordination. For all the projects presented, by the way, none of those was an initiative of Stella Maris or Dr. Makaska or Chad or somebody else. It was rather the initiative of the students in those given chapters that sat and internalized the knowledge, understood the project planning process, as Ndapile shared, understood the performance indicators like Laura shared, understood what kinds of tools they need, like Mercy shared, and the different kinds of partnerships that need to be established, just as Chomba shared. So I believe that this has put the students in a quite suitable position to start and do the work and start to engage with everybody, and the entire team, the entire Youthmappers community is here to support, make sure that you're all saturated with the knowledge that you need to take the project on. I know you've had a project briefing since the beginning of February, about 6 chapters, and this series are for us to be able to engage and be able to, enrich ourselves with how best we can make sure that this project is a success. So if you feel like from this meeting that you need more input on how to really be active and how you can engage and contribute to your community in a sustainable way with the limited resources that you do have at hand, please feel free to reach out. We have the different modes of communication that Tommy Charles shared, WhatsApp, email, all those, Twitter. Just feel free to reach out and ask questions, and you'll be guided to where next you can go to acquire the support that you need to mobilize your fellows and the community at large, and then provide excellent outputs. We'll be here again on Saturday next week, and it will also be an amazing session where we'll have presentations to really in-depth learn about the techniques and the technicalities in agricultural mapping itself, and also community engagement as a whole, specifically tailored to this agricultural mapping. So I look forward to have you there on time on that day. And have yourselves a nice evening. Thank you all. A group photo. Laura, I'm not sure everybody's able to put their camera on, but definitely if they can, yes, we can take a minute for a group photo. Are we able to turn our cameras on? I tried to reduce the security measures. Perfect. Okay, perfect, yeah. Okay, let's turn our cameras on for the photo, please.
I can't turn on because I have been muted.
But we can hear you now.
Please unmute me so as you can take a group photo.
You should be able to unmute yourself now. Okay.
Same as I.
I know there are teams in groups. Yeah, there are people who have attended in groups, which is awesome. And I really hope that you've been able to get a good audio and a good visual for the presentations. In case you really do have questions that you've not been able to ask right here in the meeting, please share them in the different communication medium that we do have. Please share them, reach out to these regional ambassadors for questions, reach out to Eric, say specifically about the project that is going on for which you're participating right now. and ask all questions on how to actively mobilize your chapter to be a part. The ladies, a special one for you. Okay.
Thanks, Stella. I'll send the recording to everybody who registered.
Okay. I'll go ahead and take the photo. Laura, feel free to take the photo as well. Wonderful. Okay.
Can we see some smiles?
Yeah, people are definitely smiling. Wonderful. Done. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope to see you in the project engagement, and hope to see your questions and chats. See you on Saturday, and hopefully to engage with you through the week. Bye-bye. Have a nice.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.